What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Lights Out, your favorite paranormal podcast on the planet. We're back with another one. I'm your host, Josh.
And I'm your host, Austin.
And I'm Daniel.
Today, we got a crazy weird case for you. Have we ever thought about the fact that if somebody dies or if somebody's murdered, could they potentially help solve their case from the grave?
That's what I would do if I was murdered.
Right? This seems like a possibility to me.
Yeah.
Like something you can't just ignore and say that's just bullshit, that could never happen.
Yeah.
Because we have a case today that may just prove that this is possible. You don't really hear about this too often.
No, this is super rare. There are only a few cases that have this element to it, and this is one of them.
Yeah, this case will definitely make you quite, if you're on the fence with the paranormal, maybe you're like, it's fun, ghost spirits, it's all fun to, think about and consider, then you might be skeptical of this one a little bit. But to this day, they don't know how this woman who ended up channeling the spirit of the person that was murdered and providing police information that we don't really know how she got this information. That's a big question.
Yeah.
She claims, she got this information from the woman who was murdered and channeled it. Yeah, like
essentially possessed by her. Yeah.
Which is wild.
Right.
I mean, that's crazy to think about.
Crazy.
And so buckle up because this one is absolutely insane. But before we get into today's episode, we finally have the Ouija board t-shirt available for you to purchase at lightsoutcast.shop. You guys asked for it. I mean, we wanted them too.
Same, yeah.
So that is now available. It's an awesome t-shirt, high quality. Consider supporting the show. Go pick one up. You're probably wondering about blankets as well. We have them made. They're on their way to us as we speak, and hopefully we'll be in stock in the next couple of weeks. It's just a little bit of a process to get them over to our store, but those will be coming back in stock. And we'll, of course, let you know when they do, because I know tons of people did not get their hands on one, and they're super cool.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite design besides Mothman. It might be tied in first with Mothman, but this is probably one of the best designs.
Yeah, it's super cool. I love the design so much. So go pick yourself up a Ouija board shirt at lightsoutcast.shop. But also, I wanted to mention that, we're very close to getting to 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. Can you believe that?
That's weird to think about.
500,000 of you have, or almost 500,000 of you have subscribed to the channel, which is absolutely amazing. We love it. It supports the show. It's free to do. And if you're not subscribed, go subscribe right now, because looking at analytics, 40% of you are watching the show on a weekly basis and just not hitting the subscribe button.
Just slap that button. Come on.
Help us get there. It makes us happy. Maybe we'll, once we hit 500,000, we'll do something a little special. Maybe we'll, go in full costume again, or, have Austin do a little dance for you.
Yeah.
Whatever you guys want.
If you can prove to me that you hit subscribe, DM me proof, and I will send back a picture of my feet.
Wow. I don't know if you should do that. But, no promises on that one, but we'll at least give you a thumbs up, right?
Yeah.
Appreciate that. But yeah, thanks to all of you who have already subscribed. We really appreciate it. Maybe go check to see if you're still subscribed, because I've seen people are like, I subscribed to you guys years ago, and I just went and checked, and YouTube unsubscribed me from you guys.
Really?
Yeah, there's this weird thing where people subscribe to a channel and then they go check it later on and they're unsubscribed for some reason.
Huh.
And YouTube's doing some fucking witchcraft behind the scenes and trying to take the channels like ours down.
Damn.
They don't want to see us succeed over at YouTube.
No, they don't.
No. And they didn't like our last episode either.
No, they didn't.
No. So we got totally screwed on that one. So yeah. Just a lot of ways to support the show, both free and, if you have a little bit of money spare, support us via the merch. We really appreciate it. But let's go ahead and get into this case today, because this one is fucking insane. And I still don't know where I land on it. This whole concept of somebody who, is deceased, and especially somebody who is murdered, and being able to help solve their case after they're gone is just such a wild concept to think about. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Carrie Ann Jopic case.
Yeah, yeah.
A little bit different, not quite as like personal like as this case is, where somebody's actually being possessed by somebody who's been murdered, but has some similar elements there with that story. So
For sure.
if you remember that one, some of that's going to translate here. But this case revolves around a woman named Teresita Basa, and she was born on March 13th, 1929 in the city of Dumaguete, Philippines. Her parents were Pedro and Socorro Basa, and they were successful business owners, and Teresita was their only child. She was a well-rounded, passionate child who really just picked up things very quickly, and she developed a passion for gardening and music at a young age. Her mother would go on to teach her everything she knew about gardening. And as for music, she played the piano. I think a lot of us feel like that's like a
piano lessons.
First musical introduction often comes through piano, which is always interesting to me because that's like pretty hard.
Piano is very hard, yeah.
Especially because you got to read music to play piano, I believe.
Yeah. A lot of the times. I know some people can do it by ear, but yeah, a lot of it.
By ear is just like natural born.
Yeah.
Like some people have it, some people don't.
Yeah.
But it seems like that's a introductory instrument for most people. I know I took some piano lessons. My mom plays piano.
Nice.
So she introduced us to that and would teach us how to play piano a little bit.
Yeah,
you play like chopsticks. And like Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah.
I still know some like those basic piano songs by heart.
And my brother-in-law has a master's in piano performance.
Really? Damn.
It's insane watching him play. He just memorizes Beethoven or Debussy or whatever, and he can just play for, 45 minutes straight of a memorized piece.
Wild.
It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Probably took years to get to that point.
He practices like 8 hours, 9 hours a day.
Damn.
Isn't that crazy?
That's really cool. I mean, that takes commitment. I mean, all instruments take commitment, but I think there's some instruments that are a little bit easier to learn.
For sure.
Like I would say guitar is probably one of the easiest ones to learn, especially if you learn tablature. You don't have to learn music.
True.
And tablature really makes it easy because it's based on like a number system.
Yeah.
And, it kind of tells you exactly what finger and what fret and what string. So that's a great. Drums, I feel like, are pretty hard.
Drums are, you have to wrap your mind around like getting all your limbs doing different things, which is
at the same time.
Which is even hard for me still after playing for, 2 decades straight. It's still hard for me to do certain things.
Yeah. I remember I wanted to play drums as a kid, and my dad's like, I'm not buying you a drum set. I'm buying you a snare drum. And you're starting with that.
Yeah, that's what I started with.
Yeah, which
way back in like 5th
I think
grade.
makes sense. But like when you're a kid, you're like, I want the whole set. I want the cymbals and everything. But no, it was like, it was
that
like
is how you
little
learn
drum
basic
beats.
Rhythm. Yeah.
So I gave that up pretty quickly. I was like, this is boring.
Yeah, and also your dad was probably like, I don't want to listen to him play on that loud ass drum set,
especially if he doesn't know how to play.
Yeah.
And it just sounds like fucking noise.
Yep. So bless all the parents out there who, support your kid playing the drum set, even if they're really bad at it, because everyone's got to start somewhere, and it's going to be really loud. But good job out there if you're letting your kids
I think
do that.
Music's such a great thing for kids to get into.
Yeah.
In one way, even if it's just a recorder.
That's what a lot of people start with in like music class and in elementary school.
Good old recorder, and then you kind of graduate from there. And obviously, what type of music you're into kind of usually influences what instrument you end up in, and it's a great for the mind.
Yeah, it is. Like, keeps that dust away.
Yeah, keeps the cobwebs from coming in too early, or just like melting in front of the TV or something. Especially now with how much technology we have, it can be very easy to just like become addicted to television and technology, and music's just such a good outlet, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel like I've never really been on the top of my mental game. If I'm trying to learn a new fill or something on the drums, I just try and practice that for like an hour straight. It really gets the gears turning for sure.
And it's like a workout to play the drums, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, for sure.
My thing too is my back always fucking hurt.
Oh, does it?
Because like you're kind of like in a weird position,
Yeah, I know. I have bad posture, and a lot of it's from drumming.
Yeah,
because I'm just like hunched over this thing. Yeah.
But anyways, back to Teresita. She was playing the piano and was specifically into playing classical music. Her parents soon imported a Steinway piano from Manila, and she'd play for hours at a time. And when she wasn't playing, she was sitting in front of the family's record player, listening to her parents' vast collection of vinyl.
Hell yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. I remember, I think my parents had some vinyl, nothing cool. It was like gospel records, I think. And
Nice.
then I'll never forget they had the spinny CD rack.
Oh,
Remember
nice.
those?
Yeah, it's
That,
like eight different ones you could put
little
in there.
compartments,
Yeah.
and then you'd like spin it around.
Mhm.
Again, all gospel music.
Yeah.
And maybe like God,
You
like
ever have a tape player?
Simon and Garfunkel.
Nice. Hell yeah.
The Beach Boys and like
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that.
Did you ever have a cassette player?
Yeah, well, you remember stereos like back in the
Mhm.
early 2000s? They were like these
yeah.
massive units, and then we had like the floor speakers.
Nice.
So we had like a decent audio setup, just bad selection. Very little good music. I mean, not that gospel music's not bad, but it's old after a while. You
For
know, you hear
sure.
the same records over and over and over again. And then you're also hearing those records at church every Sunday. You know what I mean? It would have been nice to get a little variety. But anyways, Teresita's parents really, grounded her in music, and that really helped develop that strong passion for music that she would focus on later on in her education. So during her education, the Japanese invaded the Philippines during World War II, and the city of Dumaguete surrendered to the Japanese in 1942. Teresita's parents considered fleeing into the mountains, but Pedro was persuaded by the local authorities to stay. The local government was on the edge of collapse, and Pedro had become an influential voice in his community. And just to wrap your head around that, I mean, none of us have any clue what that would have been like to be invaded.
Yeah. Occupation by the Japanese, that would be terrifying at that time.
So as you can imagine, this invasion had a profound effect on Teresita during her teenage years. She had grown up learning English, but then she was forced to learn Japanese, and she watched as her hometown drastically changed. Many people she knew were forced into service work by the Japanese imperialists, and the Japanese soldiers weren't forced out for nearly 6 years. In the meantime, Teresita moved to Manila to study music. And after graduating from the University of Assumption, she decided to move to London to pursue more schooling in classical piano. After 2 years, she finished her schooling, and then she started touring Europe with some friends. While in Paris, she was encouraged by a piano mentor to move to the United States to continue her pursuit in classical music. In 1957, at the age of 28, she moved to Bloomington, Indiana, where she continued her studies. Before graduating, she moved to Washington, D.C. in order to find a job as a typist. And while she was there, she used the Library of Congress to expand her classical music taste. At a diplomatic reception, she met a man named Edward O'Meara, a Chicago lobbyist, and a romantic interest sparked. But Teresita's U.S. work visa was about to expire, so in 1965, at the age of 36, she returned to the Philippines, and Edward came to visit her quite often. Unfortunately, during a visit, Teresita's father, Pedro, discovered that Edward had been visiting one of the local brothels, and he forced the couple to end the relationship. As the relationship ended, so did Teresita's interest in returning to the United States. So from there, she ended up teaching piano at Silliman University in Dumaguete for a while, but as the years passed, she eventually felt a calling to return to the States. So she got another visa and then headed back on December 7th, 1971, and at this point, she was 42 years old. With help from the Philippines consulate in Chicago, she was able to find an apartment on Mozart Street. I mean, what a fitting place to live.
Yeah.
In the city's northwest side, and soon she returned to her music graduate studies. She also found some work as a typist while dreaming of working as a piano teacher. After a while, she realized a career in the music industry might not pan out. I mean, that's still a tough industry to get into.
Yeah.
I have a cousin who's attempting to be a musical artist, a professional musical artist.
Wow.
And she's going to school for it and everything. And it's tough.
Yeah.
Really, really hard to break into the music industry.
Even my brother-in-law, who has studied piano and is exceptional at playing, he still struggles with
Which is such a
money.
shame. I hate that the arts are not, there's not a lot of like viable career plans.
Yeah, it's like teaching is a big one, but yeah, and then a lot of people, they just continue studying and then, yeah, it's hard to, it's like hard to, what do you do? I know accompaniment is what he does a lot, for high schools and stuff like that, or stage performances and things like that. But yeah, it's just hard to find work.
Yeah. And like a lot of people end up moving to one of the hubs, right? Like there's only so many, you can't live in Oklahoma.
No. Yeah.
And be
not at all.
And be a professional music artist or, any of the other jobs that you mentioned.
Yeah. You got to go to New York, Chicago,
Nashville.
Nashville is a huge music area.
Otherwise, there's not a whole lot you can do. Which is what's cool though, is the internet has made it a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of artists that have YouTube channels now, and they've been able to make a career that way.
For sure.
I mean, one of the artists that comes to mind that I'm a big fan of, Zach Bryan, he started on YouTube.
Yeah.
And he just like made videos of him playing his songs, in his backyard.
I feel like that's pretty common nowadays.
Yeah.
You start on YouTube.
And all it takes is like one thing to go uber viral. And then overnight he became he's one of the largest artists in country music, Americana music now. Mm-hmm. And he was up for a Grammy, and it's his life completely changed. He's selling out stadiums. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But again, that's like small.
It's one guy out of a billion trying to do that.
There's tons of people trying to make it. So it's a tough gig for sure. So instead, Teresita enrolled as a student in the respiratory therapy program at the Central YMCA Community College in September of 1972. 2 years later, she graduated and found work as a respiratory therapist at Edgewater Hospital in Chicago. With the better pay, she was finally able to move into a larger place at 2740 North Pine Grove Avenue on the 15th floor of the Pine Grove apartment building, which was a few blocks from Lincoln Park. Love that band. She also began socializing more with her coworkers, including Ruth Loeb, one of the hospital's administrators. And Ruth quickly became one of Teresita's best friends. Now that she also had more space in her new apartment, she bought an electric organ and started up a small musical group with her cousin and a few hospital coworkers, and they called it the Mahogany 5+1. And they named it this because they were 5 Filipinos and 1 white guy, the drummer.
That was me in a different life.
Yeah.
As that white drummer.
Right. It seemed like she was finally beginning to settle into a nice, stable life in Chicago, but she still wasn't really ready to date anyone after Edward. That probably left a bad taste in her mouth.
Yeah.
Maybe she was like, American men, can't trust them, which is interesting because I've watched a lot of dating shows and like 90 Day Fiance, and it seems like there is this kind of stereotype about American men in other countries. And I'd be interested to hear any of you ladies out there from other countries out there if this is true or not. But
what, do they just see us as like dogs?
Yeah,
just like
literally
these unloyal idiots, feral
playboys. Which, you look at a lot of like American media, and that's kind of how men are portrayed. And I think it's kind of the reality for a lot of guys out there.
Yeah.
That at least that I know that are single guys.
Yeah.
That's not us here. We're all
no
loyal, dedicated. We are the 1% of men right here.
Yeah. We're the exceptions.
Yeah, we're the exception. Exactly. Top quality here,
I love my girl.
Oh, that's sweet, man.
Nice.
I do too.
Yeah, it's crazy because Daniel's like a liar, a cheater, disloyal, but he still holds down.
One game of chess went bad, and you're calling it all these things.
No, Danny is actually a stand-up guy.
Yeah, he really is, honestly.
Stand-up guy over here.
I appreciate you guys.
Austin, though,
yeah.
I don't know. You'd have to talk to your girlfriend about that.
I might be the American stereotype.
But still, anyway, she wasn't ready to date again. She still had some trust issues with men. But in the fall of 1975, she got a letter from an old pen pal, a man named Robert Krause, saying he was going to be in the city for a convention and wanted to take her out for dinner. She agreed, but only if her 2 friends could join. He later showed up at her apartment, and they all had a good time during their night out on the town. But she still, she wasn't quite interested yet in getting into a romantic relationship because she was very focused on her career, her band, and her budding social life in Chicago. Mahogany 5+1 would play shows here and there, and Teresita also loved to throw parties with her friends. She never drank, though, or used drugs recreationally. She kept it pretty pretty straight-laced, which is not a bad way to go. And she always kept her fridge stocked with beer and liquor in case her friends wanted some, which I love friends like that.
That's awesome.
That's cool. If you don't drink or, party, like, that's totally fine. But to take that extra step and be like, oh, I'll host parties and provide the drinks, that's
awesome.
pretty cool.
If anything, I kind of want the host to be with it.
Yeah.
The parties where the host goes like loose cannon is when shit
Totally.
gets out of control,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's nice to have the host being the only sober one there, kind of holding down the fort.
Yeah, that's such a good point. In the summer of 1976, she threw one of her biggest parties yet. Her mother had just come into town to visit, and so she gave her mother a tour of the city and then introduced her to all of her friends. She made sure to invite her friend Ruth and her new friend Alan Showery, an attendant from Edgewater Hospital. They all had a great time, and her mother eventually returned to the Philippines. I don't know about you, but nothing makes me shed more tears than looking at my bank account, realizing that I'm still paying for a subscription that I haven't used in a long, long time. I mean, nobody likes to waste money, especially these days. Everything is so expensive and you need every dollar in your pocket for those things that really matter. Well, Rocket Money has absolutely changed the game for me in how I manage my personal finances. If you're not familiar, Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels those unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. If you're not using it, stop what you're doing right now. Go download the Rocket Money app or go to rocketmoney.com/lightsout because this app is an absolute game changer. I literally use it every single day. I recommend it to all my friends, coworkers, because it will save you money. With Rocket Money, I have full control over my subscriptions and a clear view of my expenses. It provides me with a spending report every single month, and I can compare my spending month to month. It really just gives you a much easier view at your finances. You can connect your bank accounts, your credit cards. Basically, every financial account you have, you can connect it to Rocket Money and keep track of it all in one place. What's cool about Rocket Money is it'll even try to negotiate lower bills for you by up to 20%. All you have to do is submit a picture of your bill, and then Rocket Money takes care of the rest. They'll deal with the customer service for you. And if you go with their premium plan, which I pay for, it's highly worth it. You get net worth, you get credit monitoring, and it really becomes a robust personal finance companion, really. It's an amazing app. Love it. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's features. So it literally pays for itself. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/lightsout. That's rocketmoney.com/lightsout. Seriously, check it out. Helps the show out as well. Go to rocketmoney.com/lightsout.
So life went on as normal for a while until February 21st, 1977. Teresita had just got off her shift and she was putting on her coat to leave when she was approached by her friend Alan, who we just mentioned. They spoke for a little bit before leaving the hospital together, and they planned on catching the bus route since it made stops near each of their apartment buildings. Alan lived with his common-law wife at the time, and he was only a few blocks away from where Teresita lived. They often did this on any given day when their shift ended around the same time. So on the bus ride home, Teresita mentioned that something was wrong with her TV set, and Alan had claimed to be a handyman, so he said, "Hey, I can swing by a bit later tonight and take a look at it." Teresita also mentioned a Mahogany 5+1 show they had coming up and how she worried their drummer might leave the band. Alan mentioned, he's like, "Hey, I also play drums and I can fill in for a while if you need it." So Teresita told him to come see them live to see if he would be interested, if he would be a good fit for the style of music that they were playing. But Alan mentioned that money was tight, so he couldn't afford a ticket. So as the bus arrived at Teresita's stop, she told Alan, "Don't worry about it. I'll get you a ticket and you can pick it up later when you stop by to fix the TV set." So that evening around 7 p.m., Teresita called her bandmate and friend from work, Dr. John Abella. They talked about the band, ticket sales, and how they were going to market this upcoming show. She mentioned that her friend Alan, who John was familiar with since they all worked at Edgewater, that he could possibly fill in as their drummer. And after about 10 minutes on the phone, Teresita said she had to get the apartment ready for some company, and they hung up. At around 7:30 p.m. that night, Teresita answered her phone when her good friend Ruth Loeb called. They talked for about 20 minutes before Teresita mentioned she had a male visitor, but she didn't mention Alan by name. And this was the last time anyone heard from Teresita. So around 8:40 p.m. that night, Teresita's neighbors, Catherine and Madrid Naz, were cleaning up after dinner. They also lived on the 15th floor of the Pine Grove apartment building. Madrid first noticed a faint smell like something burning, and they both checked around their apartment to see if they had accidentally left the stove on or if they left a candle burning and they forgot about it, but they realized that the smell wasn't coming from anything inside their apartment. So Madrid opened their apartment door and noticed smoke was kind of seeping, billowing through their hallway. So both Madrid and Catherine bolted down the hallway, yelling fire and banging on their neighbors' doors so that they could evacuate the floor. Madrid then raced down to the 7th floor to warn the building's maintenance worker about the fire. When Chicago firefighters finally arrived, they checked the apartments on the 15th floor to make sure everyone was out, and they also identified that the apartment where the smoke was coming from was Teresita's apartment. As firefighters entered, they noticed the place had been completely ransacked. They identified the smoke as coming from a fire in the center of the living room, and once they put out the flames, the fire lieutenant began investigating how the fire had started. It looked like an arson had set fire to the mattress in the center of the room, which was strange. It was a living room, so why is there a mattress there? There's also a pile of clothes that had been stuffed underneath that mattress. But as firefighters examined the mattress, they discovered what looked like a human knee sticking out from beneath the debris. As they pulled the mattress back, they found the naked and charred corpse of 48-year-old Teresita Basa. A kitchen knife had been plunged into the center of her chest, and their first guess was that this was possibly a rape and murder, or possibly a robbery gone wrong, and the fire had been set to destroy evidence.
My question is, was there not fire alarms in this building, or is it just too old that they didn't have it?
Yeah, that's a good question. You would think fire alarms would have become standard by now, right?
So it sounds like it was the late 80s when the requirements for Uniform Building Code came out to require that hardwired smoke alarms be interconnected. But even then, so maybe there was an alarm going off, but it was just in that unit.
Yeah.
And so maybe it was before, the whole building had an interconnected system.
Right.
Because it's crazy to think that this fire had been started and was like roaring. It was like blazing at this point.
Right.
But yet nobody really knew that it was going on. Like,
yeah. You'd seem like there would be out in the hallway one of those you break the glass and pull it, right? But yeah, I guess not.
Because clearly it had been burning for some time at this point. The fire lieutenant, Warren Whalen, immediately radioed the police, and the apartment at this point was now a murder crime scene because obviously they just found the remains, and it's very clear that somebody intentionally started this fire in the apartment. So when detectives arrived, they inspected the body, but obviously when a body has been lit on fire, there's going to be serious damage. Teresita had burns on both of her arms and her head, and only a small patch of hair was still attached. The pile of clothing had protected some of her face, torso, and upper legs, though. And as they searched the house, they quickly identified Teresita from the pictures, the personal items, and documents scattered around the home. They also noticed the entry door to her apartment had 3 sets of locks installed, but none of them were broken. So based on that, they're like, okay, whoever did this did not force their way into the apartment. She likely knew who they were because she unlocked all these, locks in order to let them inside. They couldn't find any apparent signs of a struggle inside, but her apartment definitely looked like it had been robbed and ransacked. Jewelry boxes were opened and thrown on the floor. There was drawers opened and ransacked, and in the living room, potted plants and tables had even been flipped over. They eventually found a note written on memo paper near the telephone, and they later confirmed that it was in fact written by Teresita. And all it said was, quote, "Get tickets for AS." And the AS are capitalized as to indicate that they're the initials for somebody. Detectives then questioned the neighbors who lived in the Pine Grove apartments, but they really couldn't find out that much because Teresita wasn't really open with her neighbors. They didn't really know who she was. The most information they got was from the maintenance worker, Pedro, and he mentioned he had seen Teresita arguing with someone in the lobby a few weeks earlier. He was a white guy, maybe about 50 years old, and he seemed drunk. He couldn't hear what they were arguing about and didn't want to intrude on people's private affairs, so that's really all the information that he had on this. And that was the only time he had ever seen that particular man in the building. As for Teresita's neighbor who lived across the hall, Bruce Campbell, he also mentioned seeing Teresita with a white man, but he didn't know his name. He thought he might have been a sheet metal worker, though. Another neighbor, Catherine, who initially smelled the smoke, didn't know too much about Teresita either, but she had heard a rumor that a few weeks earlier, Teresita had been attacked, possibly sexually assaulted even. And the rumor was that Teresita had been at her apartment or trying to find her key when a man in a ski mask grabbed her and started attacking her. Detectives then questioned the building manager, Joyce Coltzman, and Joyce told police that Teresita's apartment had been broken into back in September of 1974, so they had to change the locks on her door. And that was the only incident on record. Friends and family of Teresita said she was an intelligent woman with a passion for music and parties, and many were adamant about her having no enemies. Colleagues described Teresita as a dedicated professional who gave all of her time and energy to her patients, and they also claimed that she did not have any enemies that they knew of. Her case was soon assigned to Detective Joseph Stahula, who went by Joe, and his partner Lee Eppelin. Detective Stahula had been on the Chicago police force for about 9 years, and this would become the most infamous case of his entire career. When he went to inspect the apartment, he noticed a cutting board on the counter, and on top of it was a head of lettuce, a half a tomato, and a small piece of meat wrapped in butcher's paper. He figured that Teresita, or whoever this person was that she had let into her apartment, had been in the middle of cooking before she was attacked with the kitchen knife. He also found her address book with a lot of different names inside, so detectives started going through it line by line, seeing if anything stood out. And that's when they came across two of her friends, Ray King and Richard Pizzotti. These were the two friends that had accompanied Teresita on her date with Robert Krause. And when the detectives got in touch with them, they confirmed that Teresita did not have a current boyfriend as far as they knew. But they claimed that Teresita was a social butterfly who often liked the company of men on a platonic level. They didn't mention that a few months earlier, Teresita had been seeing a guy named Robert Knudsen, a construction worker in his early 50s. Detectives wondered if this man might have been the one the maintenance worker had seen arguing with Teresita in the apartment lobby some months earlier. Detectives then continued to look through the address book because they're like, all right, it's someone she knows, so
Most likely
it's in this address book. I remember. Did your parents have an address
Oh,
Rolodex?
yeah. They do. My parents
book?
still have an address book.
Really?
Yeah, to this day.
Damn.
Yep.
I remember my parents' address Rolodex. You could kind of like flip through.
Yeah. Because they actually use the address book for addresses, which is weird because I know, your phone, you could just plug it all into your phone, but they still just have these old antiquated addresses in there. Yeah.
It's probably like a trip to go look through that.
Yeah.
See like people I haven't talked to or contacted in years.
Right. Yeah. And it's like pencil sketches and like old passwords and stuff that they keep in there. And
God, imagine if we did that. Like, I guess some of us probably do have tons of contacts in our phones that just everybody we've ever met, we put them in our phones.
Yeah. Sometimes
Don't delete them.
I'll go through my contacts. And I'm like, who is this?
Yeah.
Like, oh, wow. That was someone from middle school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
God.
I haven't even thought about them for years.
So detectives continue going through the address book and they finally come across Ruth Loeb, Teresita's good friend from work, and Ruth confirmed that she had talked with Teresita on the night of her murder. They had plans to go to lunch together the next day, and she mentioned hearing a male voice in the background during their conversation, but she wasn't able to identify who this man was, only that it sounded like a man. And Teresita didn't seem stressed, and really nothing seemed out of the ordinary when they spoke, so detectives believe that whoever murdered Teresita personally knew her, which you would think would narrow things down and help them, come to a suspect much quicker. Well, that wasn't necessarily the case here.
And I think since Teresita, she was so social and she had made a ton of friends, it was actually harder to nail down than,
Bigger pool
Yeah.
than, a normal, some people would have.
Right.
During Teresita's autopsy, the medical examiner discovered that beneath the charred skin of her neck, there was evidence of blood pooling near her throat and a fractured larynx. This suggested that she might have been strangled before she'd been set on fire. The medical examiner determined the official cause of death to be a stab wound lacerating the heart, as well as strangulation. They also determined that Teresita had not been sexually assaulted, even though she had been found deceased naked. So it's believed that she had been somehow undressed to throw off the investigation, based on the evidence here. Detectives then visited the home of Robert Knudsen, who had allegedly previously dated Teresita. He admitted he had known her and they had gone on several dates, but he claimed that on the night of the murder, he was mostly home, except for a quick trip to the grocery store. So it seems like he's got an alibi for that night. And apparently they allowed him to take a Valium before administering a polygraph test, which make sense.
Yeah. It's also like polygraphs aren't even, they're not used in court. And also we're just going to let him take a Valium, which will most likely just calm him down so that it won't spike. So it's like, why even bother at that point?
Yeah. It seems like they don't know what a polygraph test is.
No.
Like, why would you want somebody to take a medication that calms you down, your heart rate down? And as you can imagine, the results were inconclusive. Even if he had failed the tests, can't use those results in court. So it's like, what's the point really, But police still try to use that from time to time.
I think it's also kind of a scare tactic. It's like, well, no, you're lying. So it's
totally.
Like shake
it's
him up a little
intimidation.
bit.
Yeah. And detectives really had no evidence to connect him to the crime, so he was ultimately cleared. All of the detectives' leads seemed to come to a dead end, though, and as months passed, there was no movement in Teresita's case.
So this is where things start to get weird. Soon it was summer, months had passed, and the case was on the verge of just going completely cold. They had no leads. About 5 months after the day of the murder, something strange happened with one of Teresita's coworkers, who also worked at Edgewater Hospital. Her name was Remibius Chua, and she went by Remy. And we're going to be calling her Remy for the rest of this episode. Remy was a 39-year-old inhalation therapist, and she barely knew Teresita, but they had both immigrated from the Philippines, which is important to note for a little bit later. They didn't socialize outside of work, and they often had different work schedules, but recently Remy's husband, Jose, and a few of her coworkers began noticing Remy forming a strange obsession over Teresita and her murder, but they didn't know why. Maybe this was some strange sort of trauma, or I don't know, if your coworker got murdered.
Yeah, if you're close to the
like,
person, you would expect somebody to be obsessed with it, especially if the case is going cold.
Right, yeah.
You want justice for your friend, your loved one.
Right.
I don't think it's that weird to become obsessed with a case.
Yeah. She wasn't super close with Teresita. It is important to know. I think that's why they found it strange, was like they weren't like best friends or anything. They were more just acquaintances and coworkers, but I don't know. Even if just an acquaintance was brutally murdered, I would be like, I kind of want to look into this, but here's what made it even stranger. One day in July 1977, Remy was in the hospital's break room alone. A few of her coworkers were just outside the door in the hallway when they witnessed Remy just scrambling out of the room like something completely terrified her. And when they looked back in the break room, nothing was there. So they didn't really know what was going on. That day, Remy went home before her shift had ended. She just said, screw it, I'm out of here. And she later admitted to her husband that while she was alone in that break room, she was resting her eyes for a moment, kind of dozing off, and she opened them, and she saw the apparition of Teresita Basa standing directly in front of her.
Whoa.
Yeah, she was completely silent, staring right into her eyes, and from then on, Remy became even more obsessed with Teresita. So now she's just witnessing her ghost there. And apparently when Teresita would come up in conversations, either at work or some social functions, Remy would reveal really intimate details about her. things that you'd think only a close friend should know. Coworkers also noticed that Remy's behavior seemed to change almost overnight. Usually she was kind of reserved, but she was more chatty than usual. Before, she almost never socialized with coworkers. She didn't have many friends at work, but now she would talk about classical music, playing piano, and she grew an interest in throwing parties. Who does that sound like, right? Sounds like Teresita. She also started using Teresita's old locker and sitting at her usual spot in the hospital's cafeteria. So, unsurprisingly, some of the coworkers found this behavior disturbing, which I would too. This is really odd. Some were even angry with Remy for becoming so obsessed with their coworker and friend, who they had lost in such a horrific way. Others accused Remy of impersonation, and it even escalated to the point where Remy complained of a hostile work environment because people were so upset with her imitating Teresita. Ultimately, this backfired though, and instead Remy was soon terminated for, quote, gross insubordination. So it's not exactly clear what was going on. Sounds like a lot of workplace drama over this and maybe some other things, but Remy was ultimately let go.
Which I could see why people would be very upset.
Oh, 100%.
By somebody getting this obsessed and is like saying all these crazy things.
Right.
And you'd be like, why are you just doing this for attention?
Yeah,
would be, all of us would be pretty damn skeptical.
I mean, imagine if Daniel was murdered and then I start coming in with like Star Wars tattoos. I start fighting MMA. I think like it would turn a few heads and people would be pissed off, and I would understand it.
Gross insubordination for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
I start talking about Elden Ring and Deep Rock Galactic. Yeah,
I would start thinking you killed him.
Yeah, right. Yeah, actually,
I'd be like, you want to be him.
True.
So there can only be one of you in this world. So
damn,
you took him out.
Just stole his identity.
I just bring the cops in immediately.
Yeah, for sure.
Just have them arrest you.
For sure.
At work.
Which is, I feel like I'm surprised nobody did in this situation.
Yeah,
or
seriously.
Maybe they did. I'm not sure. It was never recorded, but man, I would hit up the police and being like, this is really suspicious behavior.
Was she like stalking her? And
right. Yeah.
At least look into it.
Yeah. Right. You would think that that'd be a logical move there.
Right. Super creepy behavior. So after getting fired that night, so, try and put yourself in Remy's shoes. She had just gotten fired from this job. She's acting really odd, impersonating this person who was just brutally murdered. So that night, they're at home. Remy's at home with Jose, her husband, and they're trying to relax in their living room. She dozed off for a little bit in one of the chairs, and after waking up, she complained she had this extreme fatigue, super tired. And then she headed into the bedroom. Jose went to check on her a bit later and found her lying in bed with her eyes open, staring at the ceiling. He tried asking if something was wrong, if she was okay, but she just remained dead silent, laying there, staring at the ceiling. After a moment, she began speaking in two languages, English and Tagalog. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which is a native language of the Philippines. She said, quote, "Mama, are you there? Mama, what?" Jose was also from the Philippines and spoke that language. He could understand the words, but he couldn't understand what she meant by anything she was saying. And this was also the language that Teresita could speak, because she was also from the Philippines. Jose claimed that the voice coming out of his wife's mouth was not her own. He could also hear a distinct, slight Spanish accent as well, which was a sign of living in some of the more affluent regions of the Philippines, which also was where Teresita was from. With Remy's eyes still staring at the ceiling, she whispered to her husband, quote, "I am Teresita Basa." It seemed like she had been in some sort of trance, and Jose tried to get Remy to snap out of it. But Remy then turned to look at him and said, quote, "Dr. Chua, I would like to ask for your help." And this was odd since Remy wouldn't refer to him as Dr. Chua. It would just be Jose to her. But Teresita, on the other hand, if you think about it, might have referred to him as Dr. Chua since he was a coworker at Edgewater. Playing along, He asked, how can I help? And she responded, quote, stop the person who killed me. Jose figured that Remy was just having a tough week. This might have been a cry for help after she'd been going through a lot. She was acting strange. She had just been terminated. Or even maybe was she just sleep talking? Was she hallucinating? Who knows? So he gets up and he went to go get a soaked towel from the bathroom to try and calm her down, calm her nerves. But he noticed her gesture over to the phone, kind of pointing at it. And in that strange voice she was speaking, and she commanded him to call the police and tell them who killed her. She said, quote, I cannot rest until they know. Confused and now kind of panicking, Jose just didn't know what to do. He was kind of frozen in shock. But soon enough, Remy seemed to come to and snap out of that, whatever trance she had been in. She asked what had just happened because apparently she remembered none of it. Both were just left in a state of shock. Jose decided not to go to the police quite yet because he wouldn't even know how to explain what just had happened.
Yeah, what do you
want me to call emergency?
I believe a murdered woman just came through my wife while she was in a trance.
Yeah.
They're going to look at you like,
you're crazy.
Okay, dude.
Yeah.
What drug did you take?
Let's get the straitjacket. Yeah.
And I think Jose here is, Jose having this experience and seemingly backing up what actually happened. You now have two people instead of just, had this have happened without Jose present.
Yeah.
Then I think, skeptic meter goes off the charts.
Right.
But again, not saying that you should completely believe this.
Right.
I do think Jose having, experienced this firsthand adds some credibility.
And I don't know, if you want to give credit to, he's a doctor. He probably has a very practical, scientific mind to some degree. I don't know what kind of doctor he was, but clearly he's not just believing this and then rushing to the police to tell them what happened. He's like, oh,
my wife knows. My wife.
Yeah. He's like, something else might be going on here. So he kind of holds off. And a few days later, Remy was talking on the phone with a realtor in their living room as Jose passed by, and she just shoved the phone in his hands and told him that Teresita wanted to return. She then, just like the other night, walked into the bedroom, and Jose told the realtor, oh, I guess Remy's going to have to call you back. He hangs up the phone before following his wife into the bedroom. Just like the previous night, he found her in the same state as the day before. She's lying in bed, just staring straight at the ceiling. Again, she said, quote, I am Teresita Basa. I was murdered by a man named Alan Showery. He came to fix my television. He stabbed me. He choked me. And he stole some of my jewelry. Please go to the police. Very specific.
Yeah.
Right?
And I'm, reminded of the Carrie Ann Jopic case, and definitely didn't have the specifics.
Yeah.
There, it was like some hints
kind
and clues.
Vague.
Yeah, it was very vague.
Mm-hmm.
But this is this
him.
is exactly who did it.
Yeah.
This is how he did it.
Yeah.
And basically why.
Yeah. So I don't know if I want to believe her more, or if I'm like, how does she know this? I don't know. It's very confusing, but.
Well, and also you're like, what is going on with this trance?
Yeah.
So the way that I understand it is she's essentially like a medium channeling, Teresita.
Because she told him Teresita wants to return. So it's almost like she can feel Teresita knocking on her door to be like, I want to come back. Yeah.
But to have such a specific name, because even with mediums, they're they don't necessarily know the person coming through.
Right. They're like, there's an S name. They'll be very vague.
Which I'd love to ask a medium
more
on how that works.
Me too.
And we might actually have one coming on the show here in the near future, which will be very interesting because I wonder how it works for people they know. You know what I mean? If they have somebody who passes that they know, is it an immediate, they know exactly who it is trying to come through? And, because it seems like every time I've seen readings, they're kind of trying to figure out who's coming through. They know like it's a woman, or, you know, there's certain details that they're getting, but it's never like a clear as day picture, right? It's kind of like, you know, getting, you know, static images on a TV screen. You know, you're getting flashes of different things or bits of information that you're kind of picking out, but feels like it's very rare that it's like, I am so-and-so, I'm here to communicate. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and maybe we're not dealing with like a psychic. Maybe it's just straight up this entity
Spirit's
has like
entered,
has become her, or is just using her physical body as,
wow.
Which that would be
That's
crazy.
something else. Yeah.
So yeah, lots to keep in mind here. And all these thoughts are probably going through Jose's mind as well.
Right.
Like in real time.
Like, what is going on?
Yeah. How is this
How
possible?
do I rationalize this and make it make sense?
Right. And even at this point, Jose still figured like there's no point in contacting the police. There's no proof. What I'm just going to tell him like, oh, my wife, she had some sort of paranormal trance state. She was appearing to speak as the victim and has accused a specific man of murder. Like, how could you even explain that to police?
Well, and if I was Jose, I'd be worried that the police are going to think it's my wife who murdered her. You know what I mean? Like to have something come out of left field like this. And, you know, it's essentially a cold case at this point. They really don't have any clue. They think it's a guy, but could the guy have come in with a woman as well, and they just didn't know about this person?
Yeah.
So if I was Jose, I'd be more worried that the police are going to think it's my wife because she's like weirdly obsessed and like is now pinning it seemingly, which maybe a killer would do that, try to pin it on somebody else.
Right. Yeah.
Send them that direction.
Yeah.
You know?
God, imagine. I mean, that is an important theory to keep in mind. Imagine, let's just say, for the sake of conversation, she did commit this murder. And she is trying to pin the murder on another man through some sort of psychic trance state or possession. Like, either that is the stupidest plan you could ever make, or it might just be the perfect plan. I don't know.
Because how the hell are they going to investigate that?
Yeah, I have no idea.
How they validate any of that or like track that down.
Yeah. So I know. So it's something to keep in mind here. But even after this, Jose's still worried about it, but still that voice of supposedly Teresita keeps coming through his wife, and he keeps begging him to contact the police, saying that she could prove it because he was worried about the evidence. And apparently she then went on to list every piece of jewelry stolen from that apartment, including a specific cocktail ring and a jade pendant that Teresita's mother had given her. The voice claimed that the killer had given the jewelry to his girlfriend or his common law wife.
God,
so specific. What?
Yeah, Jose's got to be freaking out. He's like, how does she know this?
Yeah,
they are. If I bring her in, they're gonna be like, oh, you're immediately suspect number one, right? If 100%. She knows all this stuff, because chances are, police are gonna be pretty damn skeptical of this story.
Yeah,
and to them, they're like, oh, well. Here's a person that was somehow involved in this murder. Yeah. She knows exactly what was taken.
She knows down to the details of what kind of jewelry.
My thing is like, how would Teresita even have known all the jewelry that was taken? Unless she literally saw
that's a good point.
The killer ransack everything. That's what I'm saying.
Like, I guess you would have to take it as like she dies, and then whatever spirit she's kind of in the spirit realm, then watching.
Wow, like
which could
that's one scenario.
Like that'd
be
crazy,
wild. And they, you know, I have heard, you know, some people do have this view over their body after, you know, a lot of near-death experiences talk about how out of body, you know, you see your physical body laying there, but you kind of see what's going on.
Yeah. So maybe it's like something.
But really
like
in that moment, you're going to be focusing on the jewelry that's being taken. Like, no, not that ring. No, that was my mom's. No.
Yeah.
I think you have bigger things to think about at that point.
Unless if Teresita's spirit, if we're going with this line of thought, if she's like, how will I relay this information that it is this person that killed me? So maybe she is like trying to track down. Like,
so her spirit's going into detective mode.
Yeah.
She's like, you may have gotten me in life, but in death, I'm going to get your ass.
Exactly.
I'm writing this shit down, dude.
Yep.
You are fucked.
Maybe.
Or another scenario is, because again, we don't know, like, we don't have the details around like time of death. How long was she deceased when they got there?
I think they have like a relatively good idea, like a time frame between the last phone call with Ruth and then when the fire was identified. So there's like maybe a half hour gap.
Because it was like,
there.
Could the person have been in there and had started ransacking immediately upon entering and either somehow like had her, bound in some way and she was like watching him go through all the jewelry or something.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is like, I just am trying to figure out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a little bit of spoiler.
Down.
She was unconscious when the person
so then
was
it's not even possible.
Yeah. She wasn't witnessing it, them ransack.
Oh, well. But then, yeah, not a lot of other scenarios here.
Yeah, right. So
interesting.
It's important. We are gonna sidetrack just a little bit. Bear with me, but I think it's important to understanding possession in Filipino culture because this is what we're dealing with here. The victim was from the Philippines, and the person claiming that the ghost is speaking through them is also from the Philippines. So it's important to note the cultural difference here. Apparently, Remy's ghost possession is kind of common, especially in the Philippines, and some call it sapi, and many of the cases are witnessed in schools with younger people where students claim to see invisible things, they behave wildly, they speak in strange voices, and when they recover, they often claim they have no memory of this possession or this trance state that they were in, which is very similar to what Remy was experiencing. And some cases are odd, and they even have established possession schedules. Like they know when they're going to be possessed, which is kind of like when Remy handed her husband the phone and said like Teresita wants to return. It almost feels like scheduled, like we're setting up an appointment for this possession. So the author Hermenia Menez named this spiritual madness Encanto Syndrome. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in which the victim believes in and sees encantos, and this is the Spanish name for nature spirits, pre-colonial deities, and ancestral spirits generally.
So like the Disney movie Encanto.
Yeah, different word.
Yeah, it's obviously different word, different spelling, but
very close.
Kind of sounds similar. I mean,
yeah.
That's basically what that movie's about, ancestral spirits.
There you go.
And
I wonder if that's actually where it comes from.
I would imagine that's like the whole premise of the film is like, the generational spirit of the house, and the ancestors and like the house starting to fall apart, the magic's leaving.
Yeah. And this is Encanto.
Right. Spelled
charm
in Spanish. Allure. What's the definition of that word in Spanish?
So this is charm, allure, or enchantment.
Oh, the word itself.
The actual literal.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder if, I don't know, I could just be making shit up over here, but.
No, yeah, it's.
But I believe that's kind of like the whole premise of the movie is.
It seems very close. And then, yeah, this is Enkantos, Encantos. But it is a Spanish name. And so.
Sounds similar, yeah.
It's, Spanish related, Latin based. But these spirits, essentially, some are really attractive and generous, which is what, draws people to them. The victim is then seduced, oppressed, and eventually possessed.
So full blown spiritual possession is going on here.
Yeah.
So a spirit is essentially taking over another vessel.
Yeah. In this theory.
And channeling themselves through that.
Yes.
That's like
a physical living person.
That's the vehicle for them.
Yes.
That is intense.
Yeah.
Damn.
That's terrifying.
And they've just got school kids that are experiencing this shit.
Right. And the result is this altered state of consciousness and spirit possession. Some claim this will eventually cause madness or take the soul of a person if it goes untreated. Some of these cases even report symptoms similar to missing time phenomenon, which we touch on in our alien abduction episodes. And
where they come out of it and they're like,
have no memory of what happened. And they often have to then go through the hypnotic regression therapy.
oh, wow.
to,
So they
like,
don't have
uncover-
any recollection of it.
Yeah. So that's very similar
Like, oh,
to,
where'd the last 30 minutes go?
yeah. And that was in Remy's case too. She would come to and then be like, what just happened? And Jose would have to kind of explain exactly
Damn.
what was going
Yeah,
on.
that's intense.
Yeah. So many Western trained Filipino psychologists interpret this trance state as a disease, a form of dissociation caused by trauma.
So this is the scientific.
That's the scientific
definition?
take, is
Okay.
that this is actually, you're just disassociating, and there might be something more to what's going on here that we need to dig into. On the other hand, Filipino Catholic priests interpret SAPI as a kind of emotional or spiritual vulnerability, which opens the door for evil spirits to enter, and many caution against dabbling with the occult or engaging with the spirits or possible demons. As we know in a lot of our stories,
So this kind of translates to other religions and other
yeah.
Catholic.
And I think Catholicism is pretty big in the Philippines.
It is, yeah. I believe it is.
I want to check like just the percentage.
Yeah, that's interesting. This idea. So how would kids be experiencing this though by this definition? You know what I mean? Like, what are they all studying the occult in school and they're opening themselves up to these spirits coming through?
I know one of the what is it called? One of the theories is I'm blanking. It's like when one person starts to lose their mind. And
like mass hysteria.
Mass hysteria.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot because it's like, oh, you see your friend start doing this, and then it's like starts happening to you.
Especially with children.
Very
They
impressionable.
mimic behavior
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so looks like in a 2020 census, 4/5, about 78.8% of Filipino people reported as Roman Catholic. So there you go.
It's the largest denomination.
That's huge. Big majority there. And so in a lot of these cases, it peaked in the 90s, but it still happens today. They're still reported today. I even think I can't remember. There was a Filipino director who even made a movie about this back in like maybe the early 2000s. It's quite a common thing though.
It's basically demonic possession.
Yeah.
That is experienced all around the world.
Right. Or spirits. They don't necessarily think it's always a
negative entity. Yeah. It's really hard to make heads or tails about this stuff. Yeah. Otherwise, it's like, what's the alternative? We have mental health issues, a lot of trauma-induced psychological issues going on.
Yeah.
Which seems like people are very split on. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people think it's the latter, but there's also a lot of people, especially religious people, that believe it's due to people opening themselves up for these negative entities to kind of take hold. And I think spiritual possession is still a real thing.
Or there's people like Dr. Roll who thinks it's kind of both.
Yeah, or
it's psychological,
it's like
but it's also manifesting in some supernatural way.
In an unexplained by science type of way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty interesting stuff. Well, Remy's trance state broke, and again, she couldn't remember what had happened, but she was left with a severe migraine and asked for some water. Jose filled her in on what she had said, and Remy decided that she finally needed to do something about it. So that tells you that Jose's paying enough attention that he either remembers exactly what she said, or maybe he's like writing it down. He's like, maybe there's something to this. So they contacted a friend who is connected to the consulate of the Philippines in the area. And the friend then relayed the info over to the Evanston police, since the Chuas didn't live in Chicago proper. They were about half hour north in Evanston. The strange tip about the murder case eventually reached a detective in the Evanston Police Department, and they went to go question the Chuas.
At first, I thought this was a bit ridiculous that they had to go through all those, but it now makes sense to me because they probably went to the consulate because they were like, look, culturally, we have this background of understanding this type of like spiritual demonic possession, whatever this is. So if we go to the consulate, we're going to get into contact with someone someone serious,
right, who
but
understands
also will
our
understand the
cultural
culture.
beliefs.
And then we'll relay like, hey, no, this might actually be serious to the American police. So it might make a bit more sense.
Which again, I think that adds credibility to this story.
Yeah.
Because they at least thought through that.
Yeah.
Or maybe they didn't. And that was just like what they decided in the moment to do.
Right.
But it seems like there's probably some thought put into going that route.
A practical approach to like relaying this to police.
Versus just like call 911 and be like,
my wife's possessed. Yeah.
My wife's possessed by a woman that was murdered.
Yeah.
You know?
You probably hear the
911 operator's like, what?
Yeah, you'd probably hear the
Like,
click and it hangs up immediately.
Yeah.
It's like, how are you going to explain that?
So something to keep in mind for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Jose and Remy were also smart enough to know that there was a good chance the police weren't going to believe this strange possession story. So in addition to, telling them that, Alan Showery was the guy, he had also made suspicious and threatening phone calls to their home phone. And he was so aggressive in these calls that they just figured that he might have been connected to the murder. The detective took their statement, returned to the station, and reported it to his superior, and the superior figured there might be something to it. So he relayed the information over to the Chicago Police Department, since the case was actually in their jurisdiction, and Detective Stahula then visited the Chulas the next day. Whenever Alan's name was mentioned in their conversation together, Detective Stahula noticed Jose tense up. The Chulas stuck to the same story that they told, the consulate, that then told the Evanston Police Department. So their story's not changing, which is always, a good sign for police, because they're like, okay, maybe there's not deception going on here. And at some point during the questioning, Jose leaned in and asked Detective Stahula if he believed in the paranormal, in possession, and the occult. And he answered that he was open-minded. And this is when they finally told him about the strange events that had unfolded in the past few weeks. They also mentioned the ring and a jade pendant given to Teresita by her mother as proof. So like, okay, there's this crazy story, but we can further validate this story because we know about this ring and jade pendant that was given to Teresita by her mother. So, I mean, that's pretty strong, if you ask me.
If I was the detective, I would be like, this sounds nutty, but I'll keep listening.
Yeah, like let's follow this path a little bit further. So in order to test how accurate this information he was getting was, Detective Stahula asked if Teresita had been raped. Allegedly, the fact that Teresita was not sexually assaulted wasn't known to the public at the time, so there'd been no way for them to know this detail unless they were there, literally, when it all was going down. Months ago, newspapers had mentioned it might have been a rape and murder case, but apparently they never clarified exactly, whether that was true or not. And Remy accurately confirmed to the detective that Teresita had not been raped. So that must have been kind of mind-blowing for Detective Stahula to hear that. Be like, but then again, it's like kind of a 50-50 chance too.
Yeah. You could make a good guess. Yeah.
Right. Detective Stahula later said, quote, Dr. and Mrs. Chua are educated, intelligent people who live in a $90,000 house, a distinct change for me, which, that's obviously worth a lot more money now. I wanted information on this murder. I listened and acted on what they told me. End of quote. He then returned to the station and then went over his notes, and nobody else they had initially questioned mentioned specific jewelry. And even though they had questioned Teresita's coworkers, it looked like police had missed questioning the coworker named Alan Showery, which
pretty big miss.
Which I'm saying, like, just shows how good this investigation was not. Because there was a note that had the initials AS.
Man, we could have just looked at a list of employees at the hospital and tried to find AS. That would have taken a few hours of work, and
that's a big miss.
Huge miss.
When asking around, coworkers confirmed that Alan Showery was seen leaving that day with Teresita. So it's like, oh my God, how dumb does Detective Stahula feel in this moment? Like, oh God, how'd we miss this?
Right.
We had the initials at the crime scene.
Months had passed.
We could have looked at the coworkers, talked to them, and find out that Alan Showery literally left with her. So, boom. Could he have been the last one to be with her that day?
It already looks pretty damning, right?
Not only that, friends mentioned that he was planning on fixing her TV later in the evening.
Come on, guys.
And that's when he's like, oh, shit. The note.
He's like,
I forgot about the note.
Like, I fucked up.
Oh, man.
This
note
is
said,
why
get tickets for AS.
the stars align, don't they?
But yeah, it's just like, I don't know. And that really makes me struggle with this case.
Yes.
It's like,
yeah.
they really miss that.
You drop the ball so hard to the point where the damn victim's ghost has to possess somebody to be like,
Yeah.
wake the fuck up.
Poor Teresita. Because, like, the hell, dude. I think you get a demotion at that point as a detective if you miss that.
Honestly.
Like, it couldn't be any easier.
And I think, like, to give him the benefit of the doubt, I think he was assigned as the lead detective after they had already compiled a bunch of the interviews. So I don't know if he was specifically in there, but really, after he took over the case, it should have been pretty obvious. Like,
you would think he'd go
AS,
review the evidence
like,
in the case file and
your
find it.
Your core piece of evidence is that memo note with the
What was
initials.
found at the scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, come on.
Yeah. Not great police work
Not
by any
great.
means.
I can't really defend him on this one.
So meanwhile, Evanston Police Department had already run Alan's name through their database and found out some basic information about him. Mr. Showery was born and raised in New York City. He studied sociology and psychology at NYU and Utah State. He later moved to Chicago in 1969, and he was 30 years old when he first began working at Edgewater Hospital as an attendant. As for his criminal record, he had been arrested several times. In 1967 for burglary, 1966 for mail theft, 1971 for petty theft, and in 1972, he was arrested twice for sexual assault.
Oh, boy.
Man,
It seemed like this guy would have leapt out on the page if they just would have looked at the list of employees here.
basic detective work right here.
Huge mess.
Completely missed. At the time police tracked him down, he was living with his German-born common law wife, Janka Kalmuck, and they were living on the north side. When police knocked on their apartment door, Alan calmly answered and agreed to come to the station for questioning. He claimed he and Teresita were good friends, but it was a platonic relationship. They had bonded over their love of music. They ate lunch, talked during work, and took the bus home together. But he said he hadn't seen her outside of work for about 6 months before she was murdered, and that they were just mostly work friends. And, they're like, okay, dude, yeah, we know you're lying to us, So they decided to play a little common trick here and lied to him and said that, you know what, Alan, we found fresh fingerprints at the crime scene when we discovered Teresita was murdered. And obviously this caused Alan to panic a bit. So he revised his story and he told them that, oh no, I had only planned to come over there to fix her TV, and that was it. But he realized that he didn't have the correct set of tools, so he quickly left, and he swore that Janka would back up his alibi, that he was home for most of the night working on their electrical wiring. So Detective Stahula goes back to Alan's apartment and talks to Janka, and she lets him inside, and when he asks about the alibi, she claimed that Alan had returned at about 8 p.m. that night, but he was definitely not working on their electrical wiring at home because they had no electrical problems. So they're like, we can figure this one out. He's lying. He's a deceptive guy. When they asked her to bring her jewelry collection to the station, she said, yeah, no problem. She also agreed to let Teresita's friends and family inspect her jewelry collection. And the first to check Teresita's jewelry was her good friend Richard Pizzotti. But as he looked at the collection, he couldn't confirm that any of it was in fact Teresita's. It wasn't until he glanced at Janka's hand that he noticed the cocktail ring She claimed Alan had given it to her as a belated Christmas gift back in February, which was the month that Teresita was murdered. So I was like, oh, okay, here we go. Teresita's cousin later confirmed that the ring had been given to Teresita by her mother. They also recognized 2 more pieces of jewelry in the collection that had belonged to Teresita, including a large jade pendant. They were pieces that her father had bought in France and given to her mother, who then gave to Teresita. So this is like precious family heirlooms, basically.
Exactly.
So why on earth does Yanka have possession of this? Obviously alarm bells going off here. Back at the station, that's when they're like, all right, Alan, jig's up. We got you. And they arrested him and read his rights. He tried to bend his story even more, though, claiming that he bought the jewelry from a stranger on the street. Like, that would be a believable story.
All right.
I just can't help but think it's the guy with the trench coat.
That's
He
what I was
opens it up,
thinking. Yeah.
and it's just all this like jewelry and watches inside.
Yep.
Come on, dude. You think you're going to fool him? I mean, maybe he's like, these guys are dumbasses, dude.
Yeah.
Teresita had my name written down and they couldn't find me. So
True. Yeah. Maybe
he's like, there's no way these guys are going to catch me. But no, sorry, we got you. At that point, he knew he was in it pretty deep. There's really nowhere else to run. And so he's like, time to confess. Some claim he confessed after hearing a rumor that Teresita's ghost had been haunting Remy. So maybe he's like, I don't want none of that.
Yeah.
So at that point, he admitted to leaving Teresita's apartment to get the correct tools and then returned later that evening. Around 7:30 p.m., he decided, you know what? I'm going to rob her. He was broke, behind on bills, and desperate. And he had given Teresita a few rides to the naturalization office so Teresita could get her documentation papers. Each time she would give him $5 to $10 for helping. So he assumed that she probably had more cash stored in her apartment. So what he did was, once he was inside, he waited for Teresita to begin deadbolting the apartment door before he put her in a chokehold. After she lost consciousness, he laid her on the floor, ransacked the place looking for that cash, but he ended up only finding $30.
Ugh.
So at that point he's in deep, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to just go steal whatever else I can find. And that's when he snagged a bunch of expensive looking jewelry that he could find, which is obviously the jewelry that Yanka ends up having. He then returned to the living room where Teresita was still unconscious on the floor. And at that point, he carried her to the center of the room, took off all her clothes. Then he grabbed the knife from the kitchen and plunged it into the center of her chest. He tried to defend himself, saying that she couldn't feel anything because she was unconscious. Like, that makes it any better.
That's not how that works.
We have a spider crawling on the table here. A little guy that's been making all sorts of webs all around here. Oh, he's on the book here. Should we let him live?
I usually let spiders live. They're
Take him outside.
All right. You know what? This is our pet spider now.
Yeah. They're also good for just keeping indoor insects at bay.
He's a cool little guy. You know what? It's only fitting for the Lights Out studio. We have a resident spider. So
yeah, true.
So let us know what we should name the spider. All right. Back to the story here. So I just am struggling with why. I mean, obviously he knows that if she wakes up, no matter which way he slices it,
she's going to be like, yeah, it was this guy that robbed me. Yeah.
But is it better to go down for burglary or murder at that point?
Right. That's why that doesn't really add up. The motive to kill isn't really
to
up.
All of a sudden be like, all right, well, shit, I might as well just kill her at this point.
That's a huge leap.
Huge
right?
jump. Yeah.
I almost like, you can buy his confession, but I don't buy his motive. I don't
really buy the like taking her clothes off thing.
Yeah, to stage it.
Because to me, and again, they claim no evidence of sexual assault was found. However, she was in a fire.
Right.
So is it possible the evidence there is gone? Because to me, the way that I feel this may have played out was that he went in there and not only was going to rob her, but he was going to sexually assault her. And after sexually assaulting her, to me, that provides maybe a little bit more reason to then decide to take it to the next level. Because I'm just like, really? I mean, I guess I take that back. People die in home burglaries all the time. So,
yeah.
Maybe he was just out of desperation and he panicked and he was like, shit, I need to just, make sure that she can never come forward. And he's already got a record. So again, I don't know.
There's still a missing puzzle piece here of like what that motive actually is. And I think, nobody knows it but the killer, right?
But I don't know. But I guess kind of see to undress her and murder her. So maybe he wanted to look less like her home robbery. And maybe he was thinking that if I make it look like the first and foremost crime here is sexual assault, murder,
then
maybe it'll distract them from the jewelry being missing or something like that. And that is like kind of his cover. I assume that's kind of what he was thinking. So, he's like, all right, she's unconscious. I've just stabbed her. And that was when he went and piled some clothes and a mattress on top of her and then set the whole thing on fire with a paper bag. And then he left. On his way home, he claimed he tossed some of the stolen jewelry in the park.
That doesn't make any sense, right? Like, why would you toss some?
Why would you go through all that and then just toss it? I mean, that tells me maybe he was panicking and he's just like, oh shit, what did I do? I just need to try to get rid of everything at this point. But I'll bring home Yanka. Some of the
good ones.
The good ones, yeah. I don't know. The whole thing doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Detective Stahula wanted to make sure that Alan wasn't just reciting details that he had heard in the news, so he got Alan to accurately describe her apartment, what she had been wearing, and what he had stolen. And everything he said confirmed that, yes, this was our guy. He had committed this crime. When asked why he had undressed her, he said it was only to make it look like a sexual crime. I'm a little suspicious of that. I think maybe there is, but again, official reports say there is no evidence of that. So again, maybe he just did that as a cover story or to throw police off. They made him repeat his confession, just make sure that, he wasn't giving him a story and that there's inconsistencies in that story. But he told the same story, and detectives were certain there was enough evidence to take Alan to trial, but they weren't sure how they would explain the paranormal events that actually led the police to their man, Alan Showery.
Yeah, how are you going to explain that one?
Yeah.
Suffice it to say, this case is a mess, right? Can we agree on that?
And it only gets worse.
It's out of control, really. They missed some serious critical evidence and they did not follow through. And now we're into ghost stories, but hey, I'm here for the story at least. During preliminary hearings, the prosecutor, Thomas Organ, he was just upfront about what happened, and the judge and the jury, they were informed that Remy Chua believed the ghost of Teresita Basa had spoken through her and had ultimately cracked open the case. Alan's lawyer, William Swano, then called for the murder charge to be dismissed because he argued police had arrested him on nothing more than Chua's bizarre story. Alan Showery also retracted his confession, saying police had threatened to arrest his pregnant common-law wife if he didn't confess. They apparently told him she would be giving birth to their child in prison if he didn't confess.
With the way that this case has gone, I don't doubt that.
Yeah, I can kind of see police being super aggressive at this point because it's like, we have royally screwed up this entire thing, and I can see them getting insanely aggressive in the interrogation room.
Well, like if we have any hope of actually getting a conviction here, we got to get a confession.
Yeah. So who knows what amount of that is true? I don't know. But in a pretrial hearing on September 7th, 1978, Dr. Chua took the stand and explained what happened with his wife, Remy. He said, quote, "I was really surprised and scared when I asked her name and she answered Akoy, which is I am, I think, in Tagalog, Teresita Basa. But she told me I had nothing to be scared of. She was really pleading for me to help solve her murder." Alan's lawyer then said, quote, "Never to my knowledge has a man been arrested because of a supernatural vision. Police have never before been informed of a criminal's name by a voice from the grave."
Probably true.
So, yeah, I think that's probably true up to that point. He argued that Remy faked the trance-like episodes. She was stressed out from getting terminated and was only trying to get attention. The prosecutor argued that despite how they received the information, it still led them to the evidence to charge Alan showery with armed robbery, arson, and murder. Fair point. A spokesperson for the prosecutor's office told the Washington Post, quote, "It's not like we're going to cross-examine the voice or anything of that nature. We're really not interested in the supernatural aspect of this trial. The voice was an initial tip, but the evidence was developed independently." They argued it would have been investigative negligence to ignore a lead, no matter how strange it was.
Yeah, because like
fair.
the way I'm thinking of this is like, how would it have been any different if this was just an anonymous tip?
Right, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where you don't know where it came from, but I understand it's strange. And like, I get Alan's lawyer's argument here. But again, they're saying that, no, this just led us to a name.
Right.
And then when we were able to look into that name, all this other
Everything
evidence
unraveled,
developed. And
yeah.
we're like, oh, connect the dots here. And there's a ton of evidence to support that this is the guy.
Right. I wonder if they would have had to pull a warrant to get access to that jewelry, how in God's name would they have convinced a judge to get a warrant for that jewelry? They'd be like, yeah, a ghost possessed a woman, and that's how we found out about this. The judge would be like, absolutely not. So like, luckily the girlfriend or the common law wife was open and be like, yeah, I'll bring in my jewelry, because she was a good actor in all this, right? But imagine if she was like, no, you're going to need a warrant.
True.
Come back with a warrant. This would have been a completely different case.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But apparently it also came to light that Remy Chua might have had a grudge against Alan around the time of her termination. I think this is really important to note. And some stories about this case kind of left this out, but when they worked together, Alan had made several complaints about the quality of Remy's work, and this might have been a motive for throwing Alan under the bus to police. So
in the event that the channeling the spirit part is just made up bullshit, this could have been why she name dropped him.
Yeah, she could have had a motive to get back at him. Regardless, the judge decided the trial would move forward, and Alan's trial began on January 8th, 1979. A media frenzy soon followed once the information of a victim's ghost reached the public. One big headline was, "Did voice from grave finger murder suspect?"
Weird headline.
Yeah, strange.
What the hell?
I think the terminology is a bit odd in 2024 terms.
Sorry, it's just kind of funny. Yeah. Did voice from grave finger murder suspect?
Yeah. I know we have to be succinct.
Sorry, we're super immature over here, but that's just a fucking weird headline.
Yeah, it is strange. But meanwhile, since Alan had retracted his confession, which is kind of a lot of what they had to go on, the prosecution's strongest evidence was the jewelry found in Yanka's possession.
Had they not got...
I know. The whole case would have fell. They also leaned into character assassination, which is always, man, if you have to go down to the level of character assassination, you might not have much in this case. They claimed that Alan was a habitual liar. He enjoyed impersonating a doctor at the hospital. He told people he was a war veteran, and apparently he stole belongings from patients. Then he would sell the belongings to fellow coworkers. If all those things are true, he's a pretty deceitful guy here.
And he has been arrested for theft, so
we do know
I wouldn't put it past him.
A record, yeah. Alan's lawyers claimed that the confession was coerced and pointed out that psychic phenomenon was inadmissible evidence in a court of law. They even proposed, I love this, that Remy Chua was the real killer. That she had sold Alan the jewelry and then came up with the, quote, possession idea after losing her job at the hospital to set him up.
Damn, that's a curveball.
That is quite an elaborate theory. I don't know. I'm not trying to
I can only just see how this is playing out. All right, you thought that was... Now get this, guys.
We're going to ramp this up.
She is the killer.
Yeah, right.
She framed my client.
Yeah. It's like a crazy courtroom drama happening.
I'm surprised this hasn't been made into a movie.
Yeah, right?
This is a wild
I think it was
storyline.
It was maybe a TV movie after the fact, but it's insane. Because, I like how the defense was like, well, if they're going to propose this, ghosts and possessions and stuff, I guess we could just throw some crazy ideas out as well. if it's just getting crazy in here, let's just start throwing stuff out.
Because, like, you know, let's look at the evidence here, you know? It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of evidence for Alan physically being there.
What actually has connected him to the actual murder?
Right.
With the jewelry is connecting, you know, this crime happened and then this ended up being in someone's possession. But
That's
where's
one
the
thing,
actual,
but where's the evidence to the murder?
Yeah. No fingerprints, no nothing.
Again, this is like pre-DNA.
Yeah. No DNA.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Just keep all that in mind.
But and some, again, shoddy police work going on here.
Really
so
shoddy.
They missed some
everything.
big things. So,
yeah. So the defense also pointed out that 5 strands of hair between 5 and 7 inches in length and treated with bleach or dye that didn't belong to the victim nor the suspect were found on Teresita's left arm. This is kind of weak, but it does raise a question. Was there someone else there? The defense attorneys used this evidence to sway the jury into looking at Remy Chua as a potential suspect. This theory was never taken seriously by authorities, and Remy was never officially considered a suspect.
I wonder if Yanka had bleached hair or something. Could Yanka
that
have been there?
Oof. Yeah. That's possible. And then so Alan's taking the fall so that...
If that's the case, please really royally screwed this one up.
This is crazy.
We don't even know what the truth is at this point still.
I could totally see that though. Alan taking the hit for it because... maybe Yanka was behind this to some degree. Maybe she was fully behind this. Who knows? We don't even know. She could have also been at that apartment.
Yeah.
Who knows? So on the 5th day of the trial, Alan changed his story for the 3rd time.
God.
Telling the court that he was in a bar on the night of the murder. Then he spent some time drinking and playing darts with his neighbor during the hours Teresita was killed. This neighbor did not corroborate his claim. Alan then claimed he was drunk when he gave his original statements to police. So just trying to just debunk everything that he said and read.
Yeah, they're trying to get the confession thrown out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. On January 26, 1978, the trial ended in a mistrial with a deadlocked jury of 8 women and 4 men after 13 hours of deliberation. So the prosecution has royally screwed that trial. Deadlocked jury. That says a lot.
It does say a lot.
Because it's
a mess.
We have no evidence to connect this guy to the actual murder.
And there's seemingly other suspects that need to be looked into more. At least investigated.
Yeah.
What about Remy's alibi? Where the hell was she?
Where was she at?
Nobody looked into that?
No. And knowing how poorly they missed Alan, what else could they have missed?
Totally.
In that whole investigation, right?
Oh, man.
Total mess.
So a new trial was set for February 14th, but then that trial was postponed. After the case grew in popularity across the U.S., many have argued about whether Remy was even telling the truth, because I think you got to question her.
Yeah.
Some claim Remy had overheard Alan talking about his involvement in the crime, possibly at work, which that'd just be the dumbest thing you could possibly do.
Yeah.
Yes, what'd you do this weekend?
Murdered our coworker. Yeah, like what?
Oh my God, dude.
Dude.
Yeah. And when the evidence of the initials AS was released to the public, that's when Remy was like,
she might have just put it together herself.
AS, I know an AS.
Right, yeah.
Alan.
Mm-hmm.
It's fucking Alan. Some believe that she fabricated the trance-like possession so she could scapegoat the paranormal experience just in case she was wrong.
That would make sense. You're like, it's Alan, but then when the police are like, it wasn't Alan, she would be like, oh, I was
Well,
possessed.
She's already lied. Fuck Alan, dude.
Yeah.
Alan got me fired.
Yeah.
So she'd have motive to get back at him.
Mm-hmm.
And what more evil way to get back at somebody than to pin a murder on him?
Right.
So, he did file formal complaints against her. So, maybe that was her reasoning. In between the mistrial and the new trial, Alan's lawyers were confident he would be acquitted. But suddenly on the anniversary of Teresita's murder, Alan changed his plea to guilty, allegedly against the advice of his attorney, which is quite interesting that he would do this. Some believe that in this time period, he was visited by Teresita's ghost, which caused him to reconsider his plea. Others speculate that there was an unpublicized plea deal behind the scenes. So, yeah, I can see why, people went there. Either way, he was found guilty of all 3 crimes, including armed robbery, arson, and murder. He was sentenced to 4 years each for robbery and arson, and then an additional 14 years for the murder, which was the minimum sentence. And the sentences were to run concurrently.
Very light sentence,
Yeah.
granted, but
maybe they were like, we're lucky we got this.
We had nothing on this guy.
Plead guilty to this in the first place. So
now I'm thinking, I don't know. I'm thinking maybe Yanka was more involved than we think.
Yeah.
She
what
was,
I'm thinking.
And that ultimately she was the one with the jewelry in her possession. And I feel like if she was a common law wife, she probably had a pretty good idea of her husband's record. Like she knew he was kind of into robbery.
Well, where do you get the money to buy this expensive jewelry? What do you just get a bonus at work
and
blow it all on jewelry for her?
She must have known there was like something going on that was illegal.
I don't know. Why would she wear the ring when the police are looking at her jewelry?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And why would she be so willing to just have them look at all the jewelry?
Right. I mean, that's a great point.
Possibly to throw her husband under the bus.
Right.
Yeah.
To be like, here it is.
Oh, I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
To try to cover for herself. Which still, I'm with you. I think
it seems weird. I feel like she didn't.
Why not ditch all of it at that point and be like, I have nothing, and then it'd be still cold.
But to be wearing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be the fastest way to throw the husband under the bus.
He gave it to me.
Yeah, he gave it to me. It's right here. Also, I don't know. I think like with if we go with like the coerced confession theory that he was like, they were telling me that Yanka was going to be thrown in prison and she was going to give birth to our son in behind bars. Maybe they had communicated and then he's like, I'll take the fall. You show them the jewelry, pin it on me. I'll go to prison for it. And then when they realized they had no evidence to connect him to the crime, things transpired. I don't know. It's worth considering, I think.
Or they're just dumb.
They're just dumb criminals. Yeah, could be that too.
Yeah, we won't ever know, unfortunately. But the Chuas went on to write a book called A Voice from the Grave, which was co-authored by their friend Carol Mercado. And the book's publishers claim to have experienced paranormal activity, mysterious phone calls, levitating notes even, and radio ads about the book when none existed. Which is pretty wild, but this case was also featured in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries in 1990, and the show's co-creator considered it one of the creepiest cases ever profiled. I mean, yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, if it all went down the way that the way we are told it was, it'd be insane. I mean, this is probably one of the most insane paranormal true crime cases of all time.
Right.
I mean, it's just nuts. In 1996, the story was turned into a TV movie, which Austin alluded to earlier, that aired on NBC. But there was backlash from the whitewashing of the Filipino characters in the story. So they fucked that one up.
Yeah, ages old. I mean, that's like, we used to do that in the 90s constantly.
Yeah. God. The movie's executive producer, John Cosgrove, said that Remy's life returned to normal in the years following the murder and trial. And he said, quote, "There are no more psychic or paranormal events in her life." Huh?
Just that was it. That one
wild,
experience.
That she's just living a quiet life and she hated the media glare of 1978 and 79. Her husband, Dr. Jose Chua, passed away in 2002. Interesting. As for Alan Showery, he was reportedly released from prison on parole in 1983. And get this, after those charges, serving 4.5 years in Statesville Penitentiary.
Wow.
4 years.
4 years.
This case, what?
For murder, robbery, and arson. 4 years. 4.5 years.
Makes no sense. What? And apparently he just went on to live a quiet life after this. It's like it never happened. 4 years. He got out on parole in 4 years. How the hell did they let that happen?
Yeah. And I think he technically spent like one more year while he was being held during the trial.
Right. So five total. But I mean, this would be a life sentence in many cases.
I think it just goes to show the severe lack of evidence and the poor detective work in this case.
Which I'm sure when it came time for parole hearing that, all that factored in.
Yeah. They were like, look, they just connected me through jewelry.
Yeah. They have no evidence linking me to the actual murder.
Yeah.
Or even the arson for that matter. So yeah, maybe that played to his advantage, but Mr. Allen lived in Chicago and California for a little while until moving back to New York City. He successfully avoided media attention despite this case being one of the most infamous paranormal cases of all time. So yeah, he was in his early 30s when he was arrested, 1977, and if he's still alive today and out there, he would be in his late 70s or early 80s at this point. I wonder where he's at. I wonder what the truth is with all this.
I know, man. It's really hard to figure out what exactly happened here.
I just have a really hard time believing the possession story here.
I think once I found the information of the motive that she might have had a grudge against Alan at work, I think that dropped it for me hard, where I was like, knowing now you have a motive to just call this guy out. I don't know.
But is Remy capable of committing a heinous crime like this?
I don't think she necessarily did it. No, I'm just saying like it doesn't.
Somebody else is just uncaught.
Right. Yeah.
And Alan went down for this.
I don't know. Alan does seem guilty just when you think of everything in the case, especially the jewelry. I think there was more. I think there was more to this case. I think possibly there was someone else there. Or I don't know. It's so hard to conclude a case like this with just that severe lack of evidence. I don't know. Yeah. And the motive for Alan to kill her, it just doesn't really add up. Like he wanted to be in her band. He was going to help fix her TV. He'd helped her out before.
Yeah,
like, wow,
how did it escalate
just like
so
snapped.
Quickly? Yeah. Which I guess is possible. Like I said, I mean,
he does have a
burglaries sometimes do end violently like that.
That's true.
So it's very possible it went down the way that we think it did.
Yeah, like Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. That was only supposed to be a house robbery, turned in them killing the whole family. So it happens.
I've just never heard of somebody having such a paranormal experience, and then it's just once it's over, and then it's
never experiences
it again.
Seems a bit suspicious.
Or like this whole concept of a spirit, from beyond the grave is possessing a coworker, not even a close family member, you know what I mean? But yet someone kind of random, an acquaintance, and like communicating through them, like, I don't know. Because it seems like it's like a level of mediumship going on here.
And I think we both kind of agreed on the less detailed certain possessions or ghost stories are, makes them almost more believable. But like with this,
so specific,
it's almost like it almost makes me want to back off.
It's too perfect.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I know there's probably at least, one other example like this out there, but like it's such a rare occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help but go back to there being, so much in their culture around this idea of spirits possessing people. But again, that stretches across other religions as well. So could really apply to a lot of people. It's not quite as rare, but yeah. I mean, this just could be one of those like anomalies.
True.
That just, it happened. Doesn't happen a lot. It seems like when I was digging, it seems like people who are psychics, mediums are like, it is possible. It seems like this is very rare based on their experience and, kind of being in this field of work, that it's like, it could happen.
You have that like full blown, something is communicating through you very specifically. Is what you're talking about?
Yeah. I don't know. What do you think, Daniel? Skeptical?
Shocker.
I'm not as skeptical. It's going to be weird, but the fact that it's so detailed, it leads me to believe that either, yeah, she was contacted or she was involved somehow.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way where she can have that information and either not be involved in the crime or be involved in the crime or not. But my biggest thing is like, if she did have this information and she wanted to throw him under the bus, why didn't she just, like you said before, put in an anonymous tip? And that way she can get around the whole like weird paranormal aspect, and maybe the police would have taken it more seriously, but maybe she was working.
Yeah, why even disclose that paranormal experience at all?
Exactly.
Because they were just going with the tip. They kind of made up that story of that, oh, Ellen's calling us and making these weird aggressive statements on our phone. That's what they were initially going with. Like, oh, this guy's acting aggressive. You might want to look into him. He might be connected to this.
Yeah.
But then Jose was like, well, you want to hear the real thing? And that's when they revealed the paranormal.
And like, I understand that maybe Jose felt weird and he wanted to get it off of his chest to see if he was crazy. But
yeah,
for the sake of, as they say, fingering the guy, why didn't they just keep it as an anonymous tip?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is hard to rationalize in this present day, kind of culture and true crime knowledge. I think it's difficult to understand what it was like back then. So I think there's just some perspective that we're missing and context we're missing here with this case. Although, and I go back to the fact that even after being like, yeah, I was coerced into giving this confession, he like continued to lie and his story continued to change. That like, if that really had happened and he was coerced, like, wouldn't he have had one solid story after that was like, he just was like, no, I told you this is what I did. This is what happened. And to me, it seems like there's definitely deception there on his part. So
I do think he's guilty.
I think he's 100% or not 100%. I think he's like 99.9% the person who did this. And I do wonder if somebody else was there with him, an accomplice of some sort, whether it was Yanka or somebody else, that maybe he had stolen and ransacked the place and maybe somebody else had actually killed her potentially.
Yeah. I think the bigger question is, if you were a jury member, would you move to convict this guy? If presented the evidence.
Yeah. Tough. Like,
I think
to get to a point where it's like without a shadow of a doubt, I don't know. I think there's enough doubt here.
Yeah. I think for me, I would be in the same. I understand why it was a deadlocked jury and it was a mistrial, because I think sitting on that jury with all the evidence that they had, I would be like, you have not convinced me that this guy did this. Not convinced.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's how it goes sometimes, I guess.
Yeah, as much as, we'd all want justice for Teresita, I think based on the legal system, they did a horrible job at proving without a doubt that it was him.
So I think the problem with this
it's
case,
like circumstantial. It's like he said, she said stuff. And
so I think the problem with this case really lies with the prosecution and the detectives working on this case.
Yeah, they really, really, really botched it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a wild one, though.
Isn't that a crazy story?
Yeah, such a weird case. Let us know your thoughts. Like, what do you think happened? Do you think it was Alan? Was it somebody else potentially? Or did he have help? And what do you make of Remy's possession by seemingly Teresita's spirit? I mean, that's just unheard of. So, yeah, we want to know. Let us know.
I really want to hear the takes on this one.
Yeah.
Hit up those comments. I really
we definitely read them. So,
yeah.
It's not a waste of time to let us know your thoughts on it, because it's always interesting for us to kind of, we kind of picture this of us all sitting here with all of you, right here around this table, like hearing your ideas and theories on this. Because, I don't think there's really a conclusive end to this, or conclusive resolution as to what happened here, or what the full truth is.
And if there are any psychics out there, maybe provide some insight into, does this level of psychic mediumship exist? like this.
Is there any other
detailed and-
cases that we could compare this to?
Right. Yeah.
Like direct that have this type of spiritual possession, mediumship going on? Yeah, let us know. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with us today. Really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, hit a thumbs up or, give us a virtual high five. Give us a follow on social media. We love that too. So thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week with another one. Till then, lights out.